Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. If you have an interest in changing your life, and if that change involves living a more international life, you've come to the right podcast. My name is Jonathan Lockwood, and I'm here with James Guzman. How you doing, James?
I'm doing all right, Jonathan. How about yourself?
Doing really, really well. And when I say I'm here with James Guzman, it's not that I'm with him. He's in another country, another continent. He is in Reñaca, Chile. Isn't that right?
That's right. And this is the first time that I think we've got it working correctly. Last time we had a bit of a problem, but we're going to try to get this going on with three people from completely different sides of the globe. And I think this is pretty cool, pretty exciting.
I do too. Very nice. Yeah. And so you're having a good time there in Chile.
Yeah, I'm in Chile. I put out a couple of videos since I've been here about what the kind of vibe is here. And I've been here a week, and I've got 2 months here, and lots of things going on. So we'll see how long I stay here. But it looks like there's some exciting things going on here in Chile. So
okay, sounds good. Well, we look forward to hearing more about that. So our guest today on the Borderless Podcast is Karsten Aichholz. Just real quick, am I pronouncing that correctly?
It's pretty close. Yeah, it's pretty good, considering you're not German.
Okay.
So, yeah, my name is Karsten Aichholz.
Karsten Aichholz. Okay, very good. Now I'll go into the bio. Here we go. Karsten is a 30-something pro gamer turned tech entrepreneur. He's the youngest of three sons to a British mom and a German dad who met in a sing-along bar in Canada. As management trainee at Lufthansa German Airlines, he worked in India, Dubai, Austria, and Germany. A profound fear of missing out led him to give up his corporate career and try his beard at entrepreneurship. At the age of 23, this is interesting, he negotiated an investment promotion with the Royal Thai government to leverage a Bangkok-based video games company from $0 to $1 million in revenue within 5 years. Today, he passionately provides advice to and invests in fellow tech entrepreneurs. Making use of his fluency in Thai, he gives talks at events and universities, checks nutrition labels for carbohydrates, and gets into trouble with tuk-tuk touts. Karsten blogs about living and working in Bangkok at karstenaichholz.com. Welcome, Karsten Aichholz, to the Borderless Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
So here's the thing. I found you, Karsten. I believe someone recommended you to me, and a primary reason we wanted to do this podcast, we wanted to focus on Thailand. Thailand is a very hot area. There are lots of people who would like to expatriate there, would like to go visit there. And we wanted to focus on Thailand, and I've been looking for a person. Usually we will find a lawyer or some sort of concierge who provides services to people who are looking to relocate, things like that. But every time I found someone like that, it was very difficult to connect with them, or they were nervous about coming on. So I found you, and I noticed that you offer something on your website which you call the Thailand Expat Starter Kit. Can you tell us what that is, Karsten?
Sure. So what I'm offering people, mostly it's people who come to the blog to find out about how to find a place to rent in Bangkok, how to get health insurance, or just how to get it settled into the city. So what I provide them with is a quick starter kit that just gives them the quick win, so to speak. Like, really, how do you find a place to rent, don't overpay? How do you order things online here? Just like a mini cheat sheet of how to make your life a lot more easier, focusing on the things that matter. Personally, I don't think it really matters which coffee shop or Starbucks you sit in, but if you pay $500 more or less for rent, that's kind of a big one. So
gotcha.
That's what I focus on.
Okay, well, that's good. And now I want to take just a couple of minutes here to ask you about your background. I wasn't quite sure I understand that. You negotiated an investment promotion with the Royal Thai government to leverage a Bangkok-based video games company. Take 2 minutes to tell us what happened there.
Okay, so I first started out actually in Germany with a business partner of mine. So I always used to be a pretty hardcore gamer. And at some point, I got into making add-ons for games, making websites for games, just doing all these little things that gamers use aside from the game itself. Now, we started that in Germany. And after about a year in Germany, we thought maybe being based in Germany is not the best place if you're selling mostly to the US.
Right.
So we looked at, okay, where could we be better based? And one idea was to go to the US to be closer to the customers. The other was to go somewhere where we can do this a whole lot cheaper. At the time, my business partner had done an internship. Keep in mind, I was 23 years old at the time, right. So internship is about as much as we had in terms of working experience, especially abroad. So he had done an internship in Bangkok and had some connections there. So we looked into that and found out, oh, you can actually start a company in Thailand as a foreigner. And not only that, but if you do it in a field that's specifically interesting to the Thai government, for example, e-commerce, for example, software, you can actually receive investment promotions for that.
Oh.
So it turns out they had an office in Frankfurt where we were based, which is a nice little town in the middle of Germany. And we talked to their investment promotion office there, and they said, sure, you should fill out an application and talk to us more. We did, and 2 weeks later, we were flying to Bangkok to talk with their office there. Another 4 weeks later, we basically had the document in our hands. And that's how we got started with that company in Thailand, and how we got the investment promotion for it.
All right. So what's going on with that company now?
So, I mean, this happened in 2000. When I first talked to them, that was in 2005.
Okay.
So we've been at it for a while. In this specific case, for example, we are allowed to own the company 100%, which is usually not permitted to foreigners in Thailand. Mm-hmm. And we also received some tax incentives to basically transfer know-how to the local population, since we're hiring a lot of programmers here. Mm. And we've been running that for about until 2010, 11, where I bought out my business partner. He discovered that he is more happier in academics, and he's now working on becoming a professor in geography back in Germany. Okay. And so I used that to buy him out and take over the company, and have been running it on my own since.
Very good, and it's going well.
I'm very happy with it, yes.
Good. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we did want to hear about that, and we do recommend, we'll put this in the show notes, folks. We want you to go to his blog, KarstenAichholz.com. Unlike many bloggers, he's not, it wouldn't appear that he kicks out many, myriad of blogs a day, but they're very detailed, very interesting, very helpful. Why don't we start out with this, Karsten? How long have you actually lived in Thailand?
I've been living in Thailand for pretty exactly 10 years now. I moved here in January 2006.
Okay. And you live in Bangkok?
I live right in the center of Bangkok, yes.
Okay, very good. Why don't you, for people who keep hearing about Thailand, why don't you tell us what are the primary vicinities of Thailand where people, and when I say people, I'm talking about, I guess, English-speaking people, U.S., Europe, where they tend to like to locate themselves if they choose to live in Thailand?
I think two of the most common places you hear about is Bangkok and Chiang Mai.
Oh, yeah.
So Bangkok, of course, is the capital of the city, and with about 10 to 15 million people, no one really knows. It's also the biggest city by far. Here's where all the big companies are headquartered, and where you also find the biggest expat community. Chiang Mai is its quaint little brother up north. Very nicely located between mountains with lots of nature around, and where a lot of digital nomads make their home. One reason being is that it's a bit more slower paced, but also that it's roughly half the cost of what you have in Bangkok for pretty much everything from rent to food. So it's a very economic location to be based in.
Wow. Okay, so now I saw your article on your website that talks about that talks about the actual living there in Bangkok. I'm having difficulty understanding how it could be half that in Chiang Mai.
Well, what did I quote? So, I mean, I wrote about my cost of living in Bangkok. So I did a 6 months detailed log of every single, dollar, or in this case, baht, I spent. And a lot of people, when they do that, they forget about things like one-time expenses, flights, health insurance, etc. So I really included everything. And that came down to about $2,000 a month in Bangkok, which is a comfortable lifestyle here, right, especially if you're living on your own or with a partner. In Chiang Mai, that's pretty much half that.
Wow.
Yeah, I looked at your website, and you have something called the Thailand Money Matters. It's like a full guide to living in Bangkok, where you've broken down all the different costs. So I don't know, maybe you could tell other people how much it would cost, like overall, for someone to live there full time.
The range.
Well, I think I've recently come across someone writing a blog post who said he's living like a VIP in Bangkok for $286 a month.
What?
I think that word VIP didn't quite mean what you think it does. So
very indigent person?
No, it was actually a digital nomad,
okay.
But people like to quote the more extraordinary sounding amounts. Mm-hmm. Now, it is in theory possible to find a place to stay for $50 a month in Bangkok. That's in theory. Right. In practice, I think you would really want to have at least $1,500 if you don't want to really cut corners. You can do it for less. You can get by on less, but then we're talking about things like live far outside of the city, and that's a big thing in Bangkok because you can't commute very easily, so you're essentially cut off, or use the air condition less, which is also not very comfortable here. Right. So I think if you realistically want to live in Bangkok, you can get by on 1,000. At 1,500, you're going to be okay, and at 2,000, you're going to be comfortable.
All right, and less in Chiang Mai.
Yes. So in Chiang Mai, I think the big difference is also you can, for example, be located further outside the city, because in Bangkok you have 2-hour traffic jams. You don't have those in Chiang Mai. So in Chiang Mai, you could probably rent a house for about $300, get a scooter, and just can go everywhere you want. Yeah.
So in this blog post that I saw that you had, which was the Thailand Money Matters blog post, you went into a little bit of depth with the banking options as well as the credit card options and the brokerage options. Is there anything that you would say that is exceptional as far as, banking or having a brokerage house over there in Thailand that they may not be able to have, say, in the United States or Canada?
Well, I'm originally from Germany, so I usually compare it to Germany. Some things of those are similar. I think brokerage accounts is interesting if you want to invest in the local market. And the fees you pay for those in Thailand tend to be a lot lower than what you pay elsewhere, as in just trading fees tend to be very low. There's also a big tax advantage because in Thailand, capital gains from selling stocks don't get taxed.
Wow.
So if you buy something on the stock exchange of Thailand and sell it on the stock exchange of Thailand, you don't pay taxes on the profit you make.
Nice.
That's completely legit. And I think for banking, in a way, for expats, sometimes they complain about the difficulty, but the reality is you can actually get a bank account in Thailand on a tourist visa. And with that bank account, you can basically get a debit card and even open a PayPal account. So I don't see much use for that unless you're living here. But in practice, everything sounds harder than it actually is. Once you're on the ground, it's actually pretty It sometimes takes time, but you can figure all of that out as you go.
What about, generally speaking, the banks? And one of the things we're used to in the United States is a certain level of customer service. And throughout the world, it's not generally what you find. Is that the case in Thailand? How would you describe it?
I would probably ask, what do you expect in terms of customer service? The thing is, in a lot of bank branches, you will have difficulties even finding someone who speaks English. Mm-hmm. So the customer service options provided are naturally somewhat limited. There are, however, branches that are used to dealing with foreigners. For example, in Bangkok, the Bangkok Bank main office, which is located right in the business district in Silom Road, you can always find someone there who can help you out. So I think as long as you're in the big centers, whether it's Bangkok or even just Chiang Mai, you will have the opportunity to, rely on a decent customer service. Once you're a bit more on the countryside, you probably want to bring someone along who speaks Thai, because otherwise you're going to have a tough time doing anything except for the most basic things.
Gotcha. And now you made reference to the weather. Go ahead and throughout the year, what are the highs? What are the lows? I know you're going to hit us with some Celsius, right?
I think, in that case, it's easy because 100 degrees Fahrenheit is body temperature, right? That's what it usually feels like.
Okay.
It's actually, I would say it's usually in the, I'm trying to do Fahrenheit here. Bear with me if I'm getting it a degree wrong or so. But it's usually in the 90s. So it doesn't fluctuate a lot. Mm-hmm. So it's the temperature at night or during the day. It gets a bit cooler, it gets a bit warmer, so hottest part of the day you're maybe at 100, and then, at night you're, 90?
My gosh, wow. But, it doesn't really cool off, does it?
It doesn't cool off a lot, in Bangkok at least, where it's flat. Also the seasons are not that strong, so it kind of, so 100 is probably in the warm season, which we're heading for soon. So it's usually a bit less. Maybe, I think in Celsius, you would be looking at, I always tell people it's 30 degrees. That's about a good guideline to go by. So during the day, it's usually more. During the night, it's a bit less. Right. And when it rains, it's a bit less. But it's fairly constant. Right. So people usually perceive it as too warm.
Right.
You can't go running during the day. You'll have to do it after it gets dark or before it gets light.
Right.
You don't want to generally bike somewhere or walk long distances. So it's like, I would say in the US, I would compare it to being in Augusta.
Augusta?
That's Augusta, yeah, that's near Atlanta somewhere.
Augusta, Georgia?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
That's
okay.
I think that's maybe comparable in terms of temperature that I experienced there in summer.
Are we talking about high humidity?
Yes.
Yes. That's what I thought. Oh, that's the part that kills me.
Yeah, let me ask you, Karsten. So now that you've been there for a while, what would you recommend other people that might be thinking about going there? What is the type of person that you think would thrive in the environment of Thailand where you are now?
I think an important one is that you probably should be more looking at a softer style. So in Thailand, people tend to be more conflict averse, less confrontational. So if you can deal well with that, you'll be a lot happier. I think another factor is there's a lot of cultural differences and language barriers. So you should probably be somewhat patient or lean towards assuming positive intent and don't always think people are out to get you, because things will go wrong. And if you then take it personal, you'll have a difficult time. So I guess you have to be a bit laid back, friendly, and then you'll do fairly well here.
Gotcha. So about living there, how is it difficult for it? What is the visa situation? Is it 90 days, 6 months, 30 days? What is the what is the law on visas?
Well, the law is one thing. The reality is another.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
So I think I mean, I'm here on a work permit and a business visa. So what I do is once a year, I renew that visa. And every 90 days, I have to do either an update by mail or online to say that I'm still here. They're now even expanding that to allow for 2-year visas, work visas, which is a recent development. However, for most people coming here, they're more interested in like how do they stay more than the first month or two. And what I see there is people get a 60-day tourist visa that you then can extend by another 30 days, giving you 90 days in the country. Then they leave and get a new tourist visa and come back. I think there's now that might be interesting for people who are still in the US or Canada or in their home countries. You can get now a 6-month visa that you can, but that's only issued in your home country, I believe. So you get a 6-month multiple entry visa, and with extensions, you have to leave every 60 days, I believe. It comes down to 9 months. But the reality is you can always chain those visas. So you get a visa and then you leave the country, get a new one, come back. So these are usually referred to as visa runs. And that's a reality for most people staying here long term who are not on a work permit, that every 2 to 3 months they have to leave the country. The alternative is doing something like an education visa where you, for example, study Thai or you do a degree at a local university, which gives you a bit more of a leeway to stay longer in the country. On both visas, tourist and education visa, officially you're not allowed to work.
Do you find out about people gaining residency there? At some point, they have to get tired of those visa runs, don't they?
Well, I think the process for long-year visas, whether it's through marriage or work, is about as hassle-free as it's going to get. Thailand has a residence. It's possible to get permanent residency in Thailand, but it's quite hassle-some. You have to be here for 5 years, and if you're not married, it'll cost you about $7,000. And it's limited to 100 people per country per year, and it's only open for a month or two every year. It's a complicated process. I think the main point there is, even if you get it, you still have to apply for yearly re-entry permits and even have to apply for work permit. So the benefits are more limited, and it really only makes sense if you're someone who plans to stay here for the rest of your life.
All right, very good. Well, Karsten, in a minute, we want to come back and talk to you about the idea of business. Is Thailand an entrepreneur-friendly country? And talk about just some of the little things that may a Westerner, if we can sum people up like that, it may be difficult to do, face when they go to Thailand. But first, we need to take just a moment and give some attention to our sponsor. Today's Borderless Podcast brought to you by the Condescending Group. And I have the press release right here. It just came out. The Condescending Group is proud to announce their much-awaited Global Condescension 2016. This is big news. As you know, last year's event was held in San Francisco and was a huge success. If by success you mean the 41 people who showed up got so drunk on wine and strung out on acid that they barely remember it. This year they're moving the event to Portland, Oregon because it's just too expensive in San Fran, and the one girl with a rich daddy has been disowned by him. While there is no actual building for GC 2016, our friends at the Condescending Group just want us to let you know they'll find a park or a hostel with a big enough lobby, or maybe a mental health halfway house where they can hold it. It'll be fine. Of course, they're trying like the Dickens to get Bernie Sanders to show up, but when Sanders was informed there'd be no venue, no accommodations, and let's face it, almost no people, his aides simply hung up the phone. It's sure to be a barn burner. Go to thecondescendinggroup.com now to buy your tickets for Global Condescension 2016. Okay, there are no actual tickets, but please just come to Portland during, they think, sometime in March, and they'll find you. The Condescending Group, they care more than you. All right, we're back to the Borderless Podcast talking to Karsten Aichholz. That's how I pronounce it. I'm trying my best as a non-German. He is an entrepreneur, has lived in Thailand. He is a German-British guy, but has been living in Thailand for 10 years, has been an entrepreneur there, and he knows a lot about it. And he blogs about it at karstenaichholz.com. That will be in the show notes. Let's talk business, Karsten. A person wanting to start a business in Thailand. would you call it entrepreneur friendly as opposed to other countries you're aware of?
Good question. I would say it's opportunity friendly. I wouldn't say it's entrepreneur friendly. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot to be gained from starting a business in Thailand, but part of that gain also overcomes from the hurdles that other entrepreneurs face. So I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Finding staff here can be a challenge if you don't speak any Thai. Once you do speak Thai, you can hire people that will never get hired away by an international company and who will stay with you forever. So that's a big hurdle, but it's also a big payoff. So I wouldn't describe that as entrepreneur friendly, but once you overcome it, once you overcome the difficulties, you are in a very unique position here. I think that holds true for a lot of things you encounter, but there are also some things that are uniquely to Thailand and that are indeed entrepreneur friendly. One example is the reason we're talking is people want to go to Thailand. A lot of foreigners want to go to Thailand. And if you ever try to hire a senior tech person that could get a job in the valley, you'll know that what that financially entails. Now, the thing is, if you can offer someone a job in Thailand, especially if you can do so in a legit way and with a work permit, then the situation changes a bit. So what I'm getting at is if you can, for example, hire foreigners here, Americans, Canadians, Europeans, who will be very happy to work for a fraction of what they would be paid back home, just in order to be able to stay and work and live in Thailand. So that's a very unique location advantage you get here, and I think that will become more pronounced in the coming years. Now, in terms of legal issues and overhead, I think for a lot of people, they'll find that to be quite a struggle in Thailand. And it doesn't matter if it's a small entrepreneur or a startup seeking funding. The reality is that the legal framework isn't as strong as elsewhere, which is why a lot of people actually incorporate their company in Hong Kong or Singapore and then have official or unofficial operations in Thailand to take advantage of the local benefits without having to go through the trouble of the whole overhead and legal framework here.
I see. But then that opens them up to taxation in Hong Kong or Singapore.
Well, I'm no tax lawyer, but for example, Hong Kong doesn't tax you on profits that were earned abroad. Okay. So I think another big benefit there is if you talk to venture capitalists, if you are looking to raise funds because you came across a nice app, for example, that you think could make it big, they are usually located in Singapore. The contracts are Singapore-based. And what it ends up being in that case, for example, is it's a Singapore company that and then owns the Thai subsidiary. But as you can probably tell already, this gets complicated quickly. So what I advise people who are just starting out or who are working on their own is, considering the complexities involved, you're probably better just continuing the current company you have, whether it's that in your home country or in Hong Kong or wherever, while you get your feet on the ground. And once you know you want to have staff here, that's when you can take the steps to make it more formal.
All right. Very good. Well, I appreciate that perspective. Any more questions about business, James?
Yeah, well, absolutely. You know, I had some questions about how you, when you first got there, I mean, you were able to make a pretty good living for yourself. It seems like you have been able to acquire a bunch of speaking gigs, which is interesting. And if you look on your profile, there's a lot of people that, give you a lot of props on how well they have received your speaking gigs. So how were you able to get those? If somebody else might be thinking about moving to Thailand and getting involved in business, whether it's speaking gigs or whatever it is, how would you recommend that they get started on something like that?
I think in terms of speaking, I mean, one part is, of course, learning how to speak. And for that, there are plenty of resources. Even in Bangkok, I mean, you have about 20 Toastmasters clubs.
Oh, my God. Wow.
So, I mean, some of those are internal, but I think you could probably go to a different Toastmasters club every day if you choose to do so in Bangkok. So there's a lot of resources in that regard. How you come across gigs, I think it really depends on your background. For entrepreneurship, I found always some of the most interested parties tend to be universities, either teaching business or teaching entrepreneurship, who always like to add some flavor from an actual entrepreneur. So if you are in that field, getting in touch with them, usually what works best, you can send emails, but I found that for speaking, naturally you have to speak to them first. So whether you meet them at networking meetings where you can actually find quite a few university people here, or whether you just call them up, both work. But I think if you start out as a speaker, you probably want to go to a place like Toastmasters for the practice, for the connections, and then start approaching local or international universities in your field of expertise.
So you briefly mentioned, Karsten, just some of the things that, just culturally, the differences that you bump up against. And you had the recommendation to be laid back and not to jump to conclusions and things like that. Can you think of some things, maybe they're little things, that were surprising or funny or odd or infuriating to you or all of the above when you say your first year in Thailand?
Plenty.
Okay.
Well, in hindsight, it's 2020, right?
Right.
So I remember we had in the beginning, we were pretty young and we had ideas of how a company should be run without actually knowing how a company should be run. Mm-hmm. So we had this idea, if we have an office, then we should have working hours and people should be there on time. And we told people, okay, 9 a.m. is the latest you should show up. That's when our official time starts. And, between the traffic and the general concept that these times are more general guideline rather than a strict deadline, right, people tended to come into the office rather late. So on any given day, about half of the staff was there at 9 o'clock.
And their boss was a friggin' German. Not acceptable.
Talk about a double cultural gap.
Right.
So what happened is, at some point I sat everybody down and said, listen up, it's not okay that you guys come in late. And when I say it's 9 o'clock, then that also means 9 o'clock. Now, what I had forgotten was that one of the employees was late because she had to take care of her dad, who was in a hospital, and she always visited him in the morning.
Right.
And she was lumped together in that group. So understandably, she was upset about it. Mm. And what would have happened in Germany, or I assume in the US, would be that she would have come up to me and said, listen up, Karsten, I'm taking care of my dad. You said that's okay. I hope we're still right on this. So she would have probably sought out the conversation or clarify or call me onto that. What happened in Thailand is that employee didn't come back after lunch break. Oh. And then she didn't come back the next day or ever again. That was her way of quitting. Do
not tell me she committed hara-kiri. Look, I'm joking.
No, she just stopped showing up. She was offended by it, and instead of then seeking a confrontation, she just avoided it altogether. Stopped showing up after the lunch break, and that's not a story that's surprising to anybody who's been working here, because people will avoid confrontation to the point of not coming to work anymore.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask you about the. It seems like you're involved with a nonprofit there in Thailand, right? The Helping Hands Fresh Food Delivery. Maybe you could tell people a little bit about that. That seems kind of interesting.
So what happened is a few years back, a friend of mine approached me and asked me if I could help them out with an employment project they're starting in the slums of Bangkok. So they're basically saying is they had a bunch of guys who were qualified to do motorcycle deliveries, but not much else because there were some other alcohol or drug issues and they weren't really employable. But they thought if they created a delivery service, then that would work. And it actually did. So what happened is they had a cooking school where they where people learned how to cook, and it's actually quite a success nowadays. So they did a tour through Australia, and during that cooking school, people go to the local market and buy vegetables and fruit, and they always notice that it's much cheaper than in the international supermarkets. So they said, how about we combine these guys who don't have anything else to do and who can't find jobs, and have them make deliveries from that local market to people all across town. And what they needed was someone to, well, create the technical solution for that, namely just an online ordering system, an online shop, where people can order stuff from this very local bricks and mortar market. So that's what I set up for them. We basically just created the shop. We set up the online shop, and we showed them how to add products. And I think they built it up to several hundred customers, where they just do motorcycle deliveries of fruits, vegetables, meat, and that has been running ever since. I think it's now online for 6 years or now.
Fantastic. I didn't notice that. That's on your site somewhere?
Yeah, it was on his site somewhere, I believe, just looking at all the things that you're involved in. But yeah, I mean, that's very interesting. I think that, for people that are interested in going to new cities and new countries and stuff like that, they should look into doing things like that to, get involved in the community and stuff like that. Because I think that, people really appreciate it, and it's a way to, kind of spearhead your way in there, and so that people get to know who you are. And, especially like you in Thailand, I mean, you've been there for 10 years now. It seems to be the place that you plan on at least staying for a little while, right?
Well, it's also a time where you kind of have thoughts about that. So after 10 years, you think, okay, what else is out there? So I'm very happy with Thailand. It's treated me very well, and I really enjoy living there. But at the same time, after 10 years, you kind of wonder, am I going to stay here forever, or will I move somewhere else? So, yeah. I mean, there are both sides of the coin here.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question then. Out of all the places, I mean, you have been a good number of places throughout the world. What are some of the places, maybe other than Thailand? We'll exclude Thailand for now. What are some of your favorite places that you've been throughout the world?
Wow. There were quite a few, usually for different reasons. I think in terms of living, I liked South Korea a lot. And I think in terms of living temporarily, I think there were quite a few interesting experiences in Iceland, which is not very much on people's map, but it's very friendly people. And it's 200,000 people living there, so everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, that's funny. I was just talking to some people last night about Iceland, and they were saying that, it might not be the best weather, but as far as the people that are attracted there are very interesting, and that it's kind of an interesting culture that they're developing there.
Oh, definitely. I remember being in Iceland. We were in some middle of nowhere. There was a farmer with his 7 kids repairing a car, and we got lost. I wonder if we can ask him for directions. And we walk up to him, and he's just explains to us in perfect English where we had to go in the middle of nowhere in Iceland. And we're like, okay, that was unexpected.
Okay, so you threw out Iceland, you threw out South Korea. Any others you'd like to hit us with?
Well, I think since I've been in Southeast Asia so much already, I would probably, if I would move away from here, I would go somewhere else. But even here, I have Vietnam has some really interesting places. So does Indonesia. Each has their own pros and cons. Vietnam is a bit more laid back. Indonesia is a lot more English speaker friendly. But of course, Vietnam has a little bit of a communist thing going on, which isn't so good for business. And Indonesia has insane traffic. It's worse than Thailand. So, I mean, all of those have their pros and cons. I actually also liked Sweden a lot. which I guess more for the mentality than for the business opportunities. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you excluded Thailand, but the reality I found is that Thailand is a nice mix of everything, where you have the exoticness, where you have the standard of living, but also access to a very international community where you can find like-minded people, which long-term is really something that is one of the main factors when moving somewhere.
Okay, but I wanted to go back. What are the people like in Sweden? What did you mean by that?
I guess they're similar to Germans.
Oh, that's why you like them.
So I think, yeah, I mean, that's also what I find here, that a lot of my friends in Bangkok are Scandinavian, just because there's a lot of shared traits in terms of, I would say, Germans who live abroad and Scandinavians who live abroad, because there's a very similar way of looking at things, a similar value system, similar things what you consider important, appropriate, acceptable. So just this ability to relate people is very strong there. And I guess just my personal connection there would be a bit stronger. But of course, it's horrible weather, so I guess I wouldn't go there really.
You know, Karsten, I like this discussion that we're getting on now because, you know, I've found that I find a lot of friends in Scandinavian countries, Germans and stuff like that, no matter where I am. But, you know, there's I think there's a different kind of, whether they're Germans or whatever they are, they're outside of the country that they're from than those that stay within. But you know, I seem to get along very well with those type of people. But I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe you could shed some light on that.
Well, I mean, I personally also feel a very strong connection, not maybe necessarily to a specific country or group of people, but just to expats in general, because in a way it's a self-selected nation. Like people who choose to live abroad have a certain, do not usually follow a very traditional career path. They value new experiences. They're usually not tied down to a specific location. They are open to the idea of going somewhere else, of, I don't know, not having a house or selling their house. So I think by the point you meet someone abroad, they already made a number of decisions that all were probably along similar lines of the decisions you made, that makes it much easier to relate to them.
That makes sense. Gotcha.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's actually a really interesting phenomenon. If you look at it like, you know, people within our generation that go to, whether it's hostels or Airbnb or something like that, we relate very much more within ourselves than we do maybe with people that we grew up with. You know, it's almost like a subculture of people that it doesn't matter what country we happen to have been brought up in, we relate with each other, and I think it's interesting, and I think it you know, it'll probably take over the whole world within the next few decades. You know.
Well, that would be an interesting development to see.
Yeah, no, I really do. You know, it's like they used to call people like myself third culture kids, which were people that were, you know, that had access to more than one culture, and that those types of people have a different psychological makeup, and I think that type of a person is growing to be more and more and more of the global population.
Karsten, you talked about relating well with people, and so why don't we just talk about dating? Can we talk about dating? You okay with that?
We can talk about dating, yes.
Okay, so tell me about dating in Thailand.
Well, the reason I'm sighing is not because necessarily my own personal background, but because it's, especially in regards to Thailand, it's a topic that gets a lot of attention, sometimes the wrong kind of attention.
Right.
So I think a lot of people come to Thailand, and the strangest question is always, how do you meet normal girls?
Normal?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, Thailand has a reputation for having a lot of prostitution.
Right.
And a lot of people who come here, in a way, the first women they meet are, well, working. So the question then arises, how do you meet normal girls? So that's kind of the context in which people often talk about this here. The reality is, speaking from my own experience, dating in Thailand is a bit like dating in a more conservative part of your own country. So in other words, there is Thailand is a very conservative country, so people often don't live together until they're married. They stay with their parents up until their late 20s, 30s. So dating works different for a lot of Thais. It's a lot more conservative, so there is no public display of affection. Well, aside maybe from a little bit of holding hands or peck on the cheeks, so they're very reserved in public.
Mind blown, by the way. I did not expect to hear this about Thailand. I don't know.
No, it is.
Please proceed.
It's a very reserved place. So, and of course, especially tourists or people who come here for the first time are not aware of that. And, you know, they meet someone in a bar or in a club, and you know, I guess the Western, in quotes, thing to do is to make out before you go somewhere else. And they don't do that. And that kind of creates sometimes these funny situations where you see two people who obviously like each other, but both of them are so confused. Right. So I mean, there are, for example, if we're in terms of making it a bit more actionable for listeners, as in most other places, you meet dates on dating websites and through friends of friends. I think those are the two most common things. In terms of dating websites, there is, of course, Tinder and OkCupid, whereas OkCupid is not terribly popular here. But there's also the very, very popular, or well-visited Thai Friendly, which aims mostly at bringing together Thai women and Western men. And of course, if you sign up for a website like that, then of course the results are accordingly. So there's a broad range here, and for some reason, people tend to behave differently or set different standards in Thailand than they would elsewhere. I mean, I don't know anybody who would probably date someone in their home country who stopped going to school after elementary or after grade school. However, once they come to Thailand, they do that. So that's a curious change of behavior. But in general, I would say yes, that dating in Thailand is maybe in some ways easier because as a foreigner, you always appear a bit more exotic and interesting. And foreigners tend to have the reputation of being more, to some people, more preferable because they are more international.
Yes. Okay.
So, I think the gist of it is, it's a more conservative country, so you have to make some allowances for that. Otherwise, you might have some surprises. But otherwise, you meet people just like you meet everywhere else, through dating websites, through going to meetups, through going to sport clubs, or just through friends of friends.
What do you think about that, James? Are you a little surprised?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've never been there, that side of the world, but I definitely want to go check them out.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like we're losing you a little bit here, James. But
shit, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we got that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got that. So anyway,
okay.
We really appreciate Karsten's time, but you want to end with the usual question, James?
Absolutely. So, Karsten, you've been over there in Thailand for a while. You've been able to make a life for yourself and have a good time. So there's a lot of people that may be thinking about doing that. And if someone is just thinking about kind of venturing out and doing something similar to what you've done, what is the best piece of advice that you could give them to get started?
I think looking at people who come here, the best piece of advice is by the time you come here, already have something that's working. Because once you are here on the ground, you will be confronted with a lot of local problems, and resolving those take time and money. So if you already have a working business, a source of income, and are able to bring that to Thailand, you're in a very good position. And at that point, it's really a question of not being intimidated. People don't pick up the language because they think it looks scary. You can learn how to read in a week here, basically. But also don't rely on a single point of failure. Just don't rely on a single person that they're always right. Like if a lawyer tells you, yes, this is correct, maybe ask a second one. So I think if you bring an economic basis with you, if you're not intimidated, and if you also play it safe, I think you can make it very far here.
All right. Excellent information. Thank you so much. Karsten Aichholz, successful entrepreneur, 10-year Thailand resident, and blogger with a very interesting and informative blog at karstenaichholz.com. Thank you so much for being our guest today on the Borderless Podcast.
It was my pleasure.
Okay, so I'm glad we found a kind of a Thai expert there to come on the podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Thailand is a place that a lot of people have had a lot of interest in. And he's been there for 10 years. He's got a lot of knowledge on the area. So hope that we can, keep him within our network.
Right. Yeah. And, I've tried to typically I'd like to get a person whose business it is to help people get relocated and get set up with residency and knows all the laws and all that. And, I've found a few people like that, but I'm sure it has something to do with the time zone, maybe some other factors. I've had a very difficult time connecting with them and getting them to keep their schedules. They keep canceling, emergencies come up, things come up.
Yeah.
So anyway, Karsten was great because we got a little story on him, and he was extremely knowledgeable, having lived there for 10 years about the ins and outs of living there and what it's like,
Yeah, no, for sure. And this is a challenge that, I don't know if people realize that they're going to have when they are thinking about doing something like this, as far as leaving their home country, is that not only finding people that can help you, but finding reliable people that can help you.
Right.
And so this is what we're doing. It's an arduous task, but we're trying to find people that are actually legitimate. I think this is going to be really great. As we keep going along, we're going to really put together a network of some amazing people here, which we have in the Borderless Society. So
yeah. And speaking of that, we haven't dropped this in quite a while. Go to the borderlesspodcast.com right now and take the quiz. What happens when they take the quiz, James?
Okay, yeah. So if you go to the borderlesspodcast.com, if you see where it says, where is your ideal place to live? And take the free quiz. Once you take the free quiz, you just put your email in there, and that does not sign you up to the email list. But what that'll do is that'll get you instant access to the quiz that we've put together, which it's a short quiz. It'll take you probably less than a minute to fill out, and that'll give you an idea of your ideal place that you might want to live is. And then if you want to continue to receive our videos and podcasts and stuff like that, then that will also allow you to do. And so if you enjoy this podcast, if you enjoy this kind of content, then please join us. We have a lot of stuff going on. As far as the Borderless Society, we have all kinds of, the forum and the Facebook group and all kinds of, tomorrow we have the Google Hangout. And so, there's all kinds of people that are trying to make this happen. And we have lots of contacts that can help you do this if this is something you're trying to do for yourself.
Okay. And by the way, go over to iTunes and rate and review us. We have two very quick, very brief new ones. Philip writes, what a great podcast. You learn by example of other successful people how easy/hard and rewarding/challenging it is to get going. This podcast shows you that the limits are what you make them out to be. Keep up the good work and great content, James and Jonathan. And then we have Maritza Abroad. We know her, our friend from the Abroad podcast. Oh, yeah. One of the best shows out there about the freedom lifestyle, professional, funny, informative, must listen for those who are or want to be liberated. Thank you, Maritza Abroad. So, you too, go ahead, go over to iTunes, give us a review, and we will read it on the next podcast.
Absolutely.
Another Borderless podcast coming up soon.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.